Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. Don't move a single muscle, Julian, or this needle goes straight into your femoral artery, and I'd hate to ruin such a pristine carpet with your blue blood. The threat was whispered, a velvety caress against the frantic pounding of my heart, as Kalen, my oldest friend, my fiercest rival, and the most insufferable man in New York, knelt between my spread legs, a silver needle glinting dangerously in the low light of the coat room. The air in the cramped, cedar-scented closet was suffocating, thick with the smell of my own panic and Kalen's intoxicating sandalwood cologne. Outside these heavy oak doors, 300 of the city's elite were waiting for me to accept the CEO position of Vane Enterprises, a legacy my father had died to protect. But here, in the shadows, I was stripped of my dignity. My trousers split straight down the inner thigh, exposing pale skin to the cool air and to Kalen Thorne's dark, predatory gaze. "You're enjoying this," I hissed, my hands gripping his shoulders to steady myself, my knuckles white against his expensive tuxedo jacket. "You are actually enjoying my humiliation." Kalen looked up, his obsidian eyes half-lidded, heavy with a mixture of amusement and something far darker. Something that made the breath hitch in my throat. He didn't deny it. He just smirked, that arrogant tilt of his lips that had driven me mad since prep school, and pulled the thread tight. "Someone has to save you from yourself, Julian," he murmured, his thumb brushing the sensitive skin of my inner thigh, sending a jolt of electricity straight to my spine. "You always were careless with the things that matter." To understand the sheer absurdity of Kalen Thorne sewing my pants in a coat room 5 minutes before the most important moment of my career, you have to understand the 20 years of warfare disguised as friendship that preceded it. We were the crown princes of the city's development sector. Vane and Thorne. Our fathers were rivals who played golf on Sundays. We were rivals who tore each other apart in boardrooms on Mondays. We had grown up in the same hollow mansions, attended the same suffocating boarding schools, and shared the same lonely existence at the top of the food chain. We were best friends because no one else could understand the pressure. We were enemies because neither of us knew how to lose. But lately the dynamic had shifted. The air between us had grown heavy, charged with a static electricity that snapped whenever we got too close. Kalen had become possessive, watchful. His teasing had developed a razor-sharp edge, and his gaze lingered on me a second too long, leaving scorch marks on my skin. The winter solstice gala was meant to be my coronation. I was stepping up as the youngest CEO in Vane history. I had spent months preparing the speech, curating the image of absolute perfection. I needed the board to see a leader, a man of steel. And then disaster. I had retreated to the VIP coat room to practice my speech one last time, pacing nervously. In my agitation, I had caught the fabric of my bespoke Italian trousers on a jagged, decorative brass hook protruding from a vintage coat rack. The sound of tearing fabric was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It wasn't just a snag, it was a catastrophe. A clean split along the inseam high up the thigh. Panic, cold and absolute, had seized me. I couldn't go out there. I couldn't walk across the stage. I was trapped. I had pulled out my phone, fingers trembling, ready to call my assistant to bring a backup suit that was 30 minutes away in traffic. I didn't have 30 minutes. Then the door opened. Kalen slipped inside, locking the door behind him with a definitive click. He looked immaculate, a study in monochrome elegance, his black hair swept back, his tuxedo tailored to emphasize the broad expanse of his shoulders. "Hiding, Julian?" he drawled, leaning against the doorframe. "They're announcing your name in 10 minutes. Get out," I snapped, trying to angle my body away from him, clutching the edges of my jacket to cover my legs. Kalen's eyes narrowed. He pushed off the doorframe, crossing the small room in 2 long strides. "What happened?" "Nothing. Leave. You look like you've seen a ghost." Or, he circled me, and despite my efforts to pivot, he saw the flash of skin. He stopped, a slow, disbelief-laden laugh escaping him. "Oh, Julian, you didn't." "It was the hook," I whisper-shouted, face burning with heat. My backup is across town. I'm finished. If I don't walk out there, the board votes no confidence. My uncle takes the chair. I expected mockery. I expected him to laugh, to take a photo, to revel in my destruction. Instead, Kalen's expression shifted. The amusement vanished, replaced by a sharp, calculating efficiency. He reached into the inner pocket of his tuxedo jacket and produced a sleek, silver case. "Turn around," he commanded. "What?" I said. "Turn around. And spread your legs." "Kalen, are you insane?" "What is that?" He clicked the case open. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a compact sewing kit. Not the cheap cardboard kind from a hotel, but a set of surgical-grade needles and spools of high-tensile thread. I stared at him. "Why do you have a sewing kit at a gala?" "Because I am prepared for everything, unlike you," he said, dropping to his knees. "And because I learned a long time ago that if you want something maintained to perfection, you fix it yourself. Now spread them, Julian. Unless you want the world to see your boxers." And that was how I ended up here. Trapped. Vulnerable. With the most dangerous man I knew kneeling before me, a needle in his hand. The physical sensation was maddening. Kalen wasn't just sewing. He was performing surgery. His movements were precise, efficient, but undeniably intimate. Every time the needle dipped, his knuckles grazed my thigh. The thread hissed softly as he pulled it through the fabric. "Stop shaking," he murmured, his voice vibrating against my leg. "I can't help it," I breathed, gripping his shoulders harder. "You're too close." Kalen paused. He looked up, his face inches from my hip. The lighting cast shadows over his sharp cheekbones. "Am I making you nervous, Julian? You're holding a sharp object near my—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "Near your cock," Kalen finished for me, his tone dry but his eyes burning. "Don't worry. I wouldn't damage my favorite toy." My breath hitched. "Toy? Hold still," he commanded, his voice dropping an octave. "This is the tricky part." He leaned in closer. His breath was hot on my skin through the tear he was rapidly closing. The intimacy was overwhelming. This was a man I had fought with over stocks and mergers, a man I had wrestled with on rugby fields, a man I claimed to hate on my worst days. And yet, having him on his knees, serving me, fixing me, it ignited a fire in my belly that had nothing to do with gratitude. It was a power exchange. He was in control, yet he was in the position of a servant. I was the master, yet I was utterly helpless without him. "Why do you know how to do this?" I asked, trying to distract myself from the heat radiating from his body. "My grandmother," he said softly, never breaking his concentration. "Before the Thorn Empire, she was a seamstress. She taught me that a stitch in time saves. Well, everything." He made the final knot, bringing his teeth down to bite the thread. The sight of his mouth so close to my inner thigh, the savage grace of the motion, made my knees buckle. He stood up slowly, the movement languid, unfolding his tall frame until he towered over me again. He smoothed the fabric of my trousers with his palms, his hands lingering on my hips, pulling me a fraction of an inch closer. "Perfect," he whispered, staring into my eyes. "Seamless. No one will ever know." "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice hoarse. Kalen's smile returned, sharp and terrifying. "Don't thank me yet, Julian. You owe me, and you know I collect my debts with interest." He brushed a piece of lint off my lapel, his fingers grazing my neck. "Now go. Go be the king. But remember who put your crown back on." I gave the speech of my life. I was charismatic, commanding, untouchable. The board voted unanimously. I was CEO. But all I could think about was the ghost of Kalen's hands on my legs. The harassment began the next morning. I was in my new office, the city skyline sprawling behind me, when a package arrived. No return address. Inside was a single silver needle mounted in a glass display case, like a rare artifact. The note attached read, "So you don't come undone without me." I flushed, shoving the box into my drawer. 2 days later, During a budget meeting, my phone buzzed. A text from Kalen. Hope you checked your seams today, Mr. CEO. It would be a shame if you fell apart in front of the shareholders. I looked up across the massive glass table. Kalen was sitting there as a representative of Thorn Holdings, a minority stakeholder. He wasn't looking at the projection screen. He was looking at me, tapping a pen against his lips, eyes dancing with wicked mirth. He wouldn't let it go. Every interaction became a double entendre. Every handshake held a little too long. He was weaponizing his act of kindness, using it to peel back my defenses layer by layer. It came to a head on a rainy Tuesday night, a week after the gala. I was working late, the office deserted. The rain was lashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning the city lights into blurred streaks of color. I was exhausted, my tie undone, trying to salvage a merger that was going south. The elevator chimed. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. The atmosphere in the room changed, the air pressure dropping as Kalen walked in. He was soaking wet, his trench coat dripping onto the marble floor, hair plastered to his forehead. He looked wild, unlike his usual polished self. Security let you up? I asked, not looking away from my documents. I own the security company, Julian. Keep up. He tossed a wet paper bag onto my desk. Dinner. You haven't eaten. I'm not hungry. You're lying. You're always hungry when you're stressed. Spicy tuna rolls, extra wasabi. I sighed, finally looking at him. He was leaning over my desk, water dripping from his nose. What do you want, Kalen? I'm busy. I want to know when you're going to pay up. I froze. Pay up? The debt, he said, his voice low. I saved your career. I saved your reputation. I was on my knees for you, Julian. That doesn't come free. I stood up, anger flaring. I sent you a bottle of 64 Macallan. That's $10,000, Kalen. Consider the debt paid. Kalen laughed. A harsh, barking sound. He rounded the desk, invading my space. You think I want your money? I have more money than God. Try again. Then what? I shouted, stepping into him, chest to chest. What do you want? Do you want me to beg? Is that it? You want to hold this over my head forever so you can feel superior. Superior. Kalen grabbed my wrist, his grip bruising. You think I did that to feel superior? You love it. You love knowing that I was helpless. You love knowing that you had your hands all over me. Yes, he roared back, the sound echoing off the glass walls. Yes, I loved having my hands on you. But not because of the power, you idiot. Because it was the only excuse I had to touch you without you punching me in the face. The silence that followed was deafening. The only sound was the rain hammering against the glass and our ragged breathing. I stared at him, my mouth slightly open. What? Kalen's expression shattered. The arrogance fell away, revealing a raw, desperate hunger. I have been in love with you for 10 years, Julian. 10 years. I watched you date models and actresses. I watched you build this company. I watched you break your arm in rugby, and I was the one who drove you to the hospital while you screamed at me. He stepped closer, backing me against the cold window. When I saw you in that closet, panic in your eyes, I didn't want to mock you. I wanted to kill anyone who might have seen you like that. I wanted to cover you up and keep you safe. And when I was sewing that damn fabric. He let out a shaky breath, his eyes dropping to my lips. God, Julian, being that close to you, smelling you, knowing I was the only thing standing between you and ruin. It nearly broke me. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was Kalen, my rival, my tormentor, my savior. You're crazy, I whispered, but there was no venom in it. I am, he agreed, his hand coming up to cup my jaw, his thumb tracing my lower lip. I'm crazy about you, and I'm tired of pretending that this, he gestured between us, is just business rivalry. It's not. It's obsession. So the needle, I managed, my voice trembling. The texts. I needed a reaction, he admitted. I needed you to think about me. To feel me even when I wasn't there. I wanted to be under your skin, Julian. Just like that needle. The metaphor hung in the air, sharp and piercing. I looked at him, really looked at him. The wet hair, the dark eyes wide with vulnerability, the sheer intensity of his presence. I realized then that the annoyance I had felt all week wasn't annoyance. It was anticipation. I had been waiting for him to push. I had been waiting for him to cross the line. You have terrible timing, I murmured. I have impeccable timing, he countered, leaning in until our foreheads touched. Tell me to leave, Julian. Tell me to get out, and I will never mention this again. I'll go back to being your cocky friend who annoys you at galas. I closed my eyes, inhaling the scent of rain and sandalwood. I thought about the needle, the precision, the care, the way he had protected me when I was at my weakest. I grabbed his wet lapels and yanked him down. Shut up, I breathed, and crashed my lips against his. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a collision. It was 10 years of rivalry, repressed desire, and unspoken jealousy exploding all at once. Kalen groaned, a low, guttural sound, and slammed me back against the glass, his hands tangling in my hair, his mouth devouring mine. He tasted like rain and expensive scotch and danger. I opened my mouth, inviting him in, and he took the invitation like a starving man. His tongue swept against mine, dominant and demanding. I wrapped my legs around his waist, instinctively, seeking friction. He broke the kiss, gasping, his eyes blown wide and black. Julian, don't stop, I commanded, pulling him back. The door, he panted against my neck, biting lightly at the pulse point. It's unlocked. I own the building, I gasped as his hands moved down my spine, gripping my hips. Let them look. Kalen laughed against my skin, the vibration sending shivers through me. That's my CEO. He hoisted me up, placing me on the edge of the mahogany desk, scattering merger documents onto the floor. He stepped between my legs, just like he had in the coat room, but this time there was no needle. There was only heat. You know, he whispered, his hands working at the belt of my trousers. My new, perfectly intact trousers. I might have to rip these, just for old time's sake. I smirked, breathless and aching. If you rip them, Thorne, you're sewing them back up. Kalen's eyes flashed with possessive fire. He leaned down, his lips brushing against my ear. I'll sew you back together as many times as it takes, Julian. As long as I'm the only one who gets to take you apart. And that is how the viper tamed the wolf. If you enjoyed seeing Kalen take control and stitch his way into Julian's heart, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments. Would you forgive a rival who used your most embarrassing moment to seduce you? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then.